Hello, everybody. This is Sue Frederick, and I am so excited to have a mystical conversation today. Mystical conversations are my favorite kind of conversations. That's when we really lose ourselves in the wonders of the divine unknown, of the invisible realms, of what happens when we die, and share our intuitive insights, our soul nudges, and what are we each here to do in our lifetime. All of these beautiful ideas come together so beautifully today in this mystical conversation that I'm about to have with an extraordinary soul. I'll introduce him in a moment. I also want to say to any of you that I am author of many books, but the most recent book is called Through a Divine Lens. It was inspired by my own out-of-body experience, but it very much aligns with what David's going to be talking about today. So our guest today is someone who I met at a conference a few months ago and was so drawn to his soul's beauty, his soul's energy, just loved talking to him about his near-death experience. I really believe that this is an angelic soul who's come into this lifetime to share a message of healing for all of humanity. So here's his biography. David Williamson is a native of Yanceyville, North Carolina. He had a near-death experience in 2017 that changed how he views this life on Earth and what it means to be a human being. For most of his life, he had been deeply affected by identity confusion, racial narratives, racial trauma, rigid orientations towards ideology and personality. And during his near-death experience, he hovered above his dead body while in the emergency room and came to some realizations about his life that presented him with the opportunity to integrate a totally different approach to living in this physical world. He has appeared in podcast interviews and videos where he shares his powerful experience. And I know that after you hear his story today, you will be so blown away by how important this message is for all of us, especially at this year, 2023, 2024, when the world seems so divided and so chaotic and in so much conflict. Thank you so much, David, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're such a beautiful soul inside and out. And I can't wait for you to share it, but I think you've got to go back before the near-death experience to really tell the listeners about your childhood and how that informed who you are.
Yes. I grew up in a very rural town in North Carolina called Yanceyville, and maybe 3,500 people there. Even to now, it may not be more than 4,000, 3,500 to 4,000 people. But I played in the woods. That was my playground. Was playing in the woods, and we had vines that grew from the bottom all the way up to the canopy, and then they kind of tangled up at the bottom, and it was like a jungle gym, swing sets and everything. So we really enjoyed just playing out on that vine jungle gym, you know. And
I'm just
we would
curious, was that kudzu vine? The
I don't it was very thick, and
Because I
I don't
grew
know
up in
what
the
it was.
South too, and we had these like overgrown vines everywhere that made it just magical in the woods. So
Yeah.
I love hearing that story.
And it grew all the way up into the canopy, and so you could literally pull on it and it wouldn't budge. It would stay connected. And but we had a lot of fun there. My cousins, my brother, and I. And but we did see the KKK, marching up and down the street as children, and there was just racial tension, just kind of, ambient. It was just around. It was just, and even the stories that were shared, it was kind of reinforced versus like, kind of like be careful because this is just the way it is versus trying to, speak on any hopeful kind of way to be.
Right.
But I think everybody had kind of seen so much, negativity to where there wasn't a whole lot of hopeful narratives as it related to race in my town growing up. So it was just pretty divided. And and like I said, seeing the KKK, yeah, even before I really even understood what it was, I could feel the hate, and I could feel the hate from both sides, and I absorbed all of that, and that kind of just became how I thought that the whole race issue was supposed to be handled. We were just supposed to hate each other, and and just the fighting part of it seemed to be kind of natural, um, and some of the disparity and just some of the negative experiences that racism does kind of present to Black people in this country. It does buttress the bias, and buttresses some of the perspectives that one can gain, but just your experience will always have these exceptions that once the bias does set in, you won't be able to see those, and they won't inform your perspective at all. It'll just you kind of just kind of like bias confirmation. Everything that you see, you start looking for it, and you see it, and it makes you reinforce. It just reinforces the bias and reinforces the whole narrative that you really just kind of inherited when you came here, because that's just the way it's been in this country for so long.
And David, would you say that's a narrative that the color of our skin determines everything about who we are? Is that the narrative that you grew up feeling?
Yeah, it was a huge part of my experience. I didn't, even though I had some white friends when I was very young. As I got older, I had some negative experiences, even trying to reconnect with some of them from elementary school friends, and then you could see the tension, the discomfort, and I didn't understand it, or I did understand it, but it just kind of I guess added to the trauma, or the just fueled the whole perspective, the whole bias, and but even as I got older, and I started reading about history and reading about politics, reading about different activists, and studying different cultures, it just got more and more complicated. It got more and more complex, and everything that I read, even researching history, researching everything, it was through a biased narrative, and it always was to confirm, the perspective that I had, which was, like I said, was based on trauma from childhood, and an orientation that was kind of absorbed in childhood. But I would always be presented, with the opportunity to see, that this is, everyone. You can't throw a description or an adjective or anything on everyone in any given demographic, no matter what demographic you're talking about, and it makes sense. It's never going to be rational to use those kind of sweeping generalizations about any group of people. So, just the bias itself makes it difficult to see how irrational it is,
So you said in some other interviews that this made you feel angry at the world in general, just a heavy blanket of anger that kind of filtered your heart.
Yeah. I felt like I explained pretty much every failure and shortcoming, with racism, because I've been told since I was a child I was a genius, so there's no reason why I shouldn't be thriving, so racism is the reason why everything, and but and as these are things, realizations that I came to after I had NDE, but I did not consider at that time, in those moments where I was perhaps seeking employment and in interviews, I wasn't considering the fact that I actually was entering into that space with a whole lot of hate inside of me. But at the same time, hoping that person would open a door for me, and those two things don't mesh. You can't go into a situation hoping for a particular outcome, carrying so much negative energy, and still thinking that the other party is going to be like, oh yeah, sure, you're great, I'm going to open the door. And then when it doesn't turn out your way, you can't just say it's them. Once you become aware that your emotional state influences that outcome. And so that's after the NDE, I going back and healing my story. I just stopped always pointing the finger at they, and and to the point where theys and others have been pretty much de-emphasized in my life. And it's just me. I'm talking to me. And And as long as I can humanize anybody that I'm speaking with, that's the baseline of communication. You're right. There's just a mutual kind of respect, or just seeing myself in them, or seeing that um, that the basics of who they are the basics of who I am. You know.
And who
And
did you grow up believing in a spiritual way as growing up in the South, a church, and what did that teach you or inform you about a God?
yeah, I grew up, really trying to be a great Christian. I was raised in, Baptist, and I really tried to study the Bible and different books at a very young age. Uh, I had a lot of questions, and I never felt that anybody answered my questions satisfactorily. So I just always figured that I would be pursuing this for the rest of my life, just trying to answer my own questions. And I did. I just accumulated books. But the church early on, the biggest thing that I could take from where my attention seemed to stay stuck in Christianity was hell. I was so scared of hell that I think that was what I was fixated on. I didn't really um, I judged myself a whole lot because I didn't want to ever be in that number. So I would always I judged other people, I judged myself, and of course, I was always judged at a little bit higher than everybody else because I had to be in order to secure my the idea in my mind that I was not going to hell. So there has to be people below you. You have to create the perception that there's
Right.
people below you so that you can feel secure in your position of not, being going to hell. So hell was a fixation, and it influences, how you interact with people in life if you're
Yeah.
fixated on your own judgment,
Yeah.
So so I once I started because I read and read and read until it was like, okay, there's other stuff, and then I started reading other stuff, the mystical stuff in Christianity, the Gnostic stuff, the Essene stuff. Like I started reading on it, and I was like, oh, these are different teachings. These are not. Hell isn't the emphasis so much, and the fear isn't the emphasis so much. Love is more so the emphasis in those in the mystical kind of path. And so I kind of got more intrigued by that. Then I started studying Islam, and the same thing happened in Islam. Ended up in Sufism,
Right.
and the mystical stuff, the poetry,
Right.
the love stuff. And I was like, but so my path, was kind of moving in a direction. I studied so many different religions, but once I got to college, I was studying uh, Hindu texts, Buddhist texts. I had a Jain text that had like images of spaceships and instructions on how to fly them. you know, so
I
I was
love
really,
this. I love
I,
the fact that you're a seven-path soul in numerology, which means really perched above this world, studying it, analyzing it. And here you are in college already pursuing every religion you could get your hands on to understand what God is. That is so beautiful.
yeah, yeah. As a child, I had all of the what people call spiritual gifts, and it was annoying to me because it was just information overload, and oftentimes it was information that if I articulated that I knew it, I would be viewed as either a bad kid or mischievous in some way, or it would be expressing a knowing that I just shouldn't have.
Right.
So it was always I was always looked at. I couldn't just say everything that I thought, and I would think a lot of crazy stuff about people because I could feel kind of what they were thinking, But um, I was gonna say something about my childhood. Oh, this is something that as I started sharing my story more and more, I remember that I drowned at age 6,
Wow.
and I had an NDE that was not it was very simple in that moment where I blacked out, and a voice where I was jumping off the side of the dock with a life jacket on because I couldn't swim. I was 6 years old, and when I hit the water, I went down and the life jacket stayed at the top of the water, and I just kept going down. So as I was going down, I guess I blacked out because I was just in blackness, and I heard the voice say, "If you could touch the bottom, you could push yourself back up." And I responded. It was beautiful voice, really calm, And I responded, and I said, it doesn't seem like I'm going to touch the bottom. I'm just going down, you know. And as soon as I said that, I stopped going down and I started floating back up. And at some point, as I was floating up, I looked up and I could see the rays of the sun coming into the top of the water. And then I saw a splash in the top of the water, and I could see the rings radiating from the center, from that splash. And that was beautiful. So I just watched that for a moment. And then I put my hand in the middle and hit the stick that, you know, someone had put in the water to pull me out. And they pulled me out. But I didn't integrate any of that as a trauma. And when they pulled me out, I think my brother told me that I coughed a couple of times, and that was pretty much it. There was no like pumping water out of me or anything like that. But I asked him, and it's no more than like 4 or 5 months ago, I asked him, you know, did it happen? For one, because it was not a traumatic experience for me. It was just a memory, you know. And he said, yeah, it happened. And I said, was it under the water long? And he said, no less than 3 or 4 minutes. And he said people were like crying and losing it because everybody thought that I was dead. He said even he thought that I was dead.
I mean,
He said,
3 or 4 minutes, even for an adult, can take your life.
Yeah.
Depriving oxygen from the brain for that long. So yeah, that was your first NDE.
Yeah. And I started seeing timelines of the future at that time, and they were all negative, a lot of death, and it was traumatic for me, and that started my depression that I had for pretty much all the way up until I had my second NDE, you know. So, but I was also having this memory almost like of a previous experience here of being in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and that was very traumatic for me. I would come home from school and just ball up in the corner and cry because it felt like I was there in Hiroshima, Nagasaki, whichever one it was, but I saw the explosion. I saw buildings crumbling, people screaming and running. And there was a little girl that was running towards me, and pretty much in every time and most of the time when I saw that vision. And I started at age 6, I was kind of fixated on nuclear bombs. I was so afraid that we were going to do it again, and kill, you know, and mess up kill a lot of people. So even as a teenager, I started looking into alternatives to uranium, and I realized that it was thorium, and thorium is a safer alternative to uranium, and it has a much smaller half-life, you know, much, you know, it's not as volatile to the environment.
So you're saying that it's very possible that in a past life you died in the nuclear explosion of World War II in Japan, right? And you carried that trauma with you into this life.
Yeah. And the memory seemed to have been triggered when I drowned at 6. Yeah. So moving forward in this life, I didn't trust adults, you know, the military. I thought they were going to, you know, use nuclear bombs again. And then the timeline that I saw, it was just bad. It was just a lot of like human roadkill and people kind of behaving like it was normal, you know. And I didn't see any other timeline at that time at age 6. So it was kind of like it was more and more prayer to just stop having these visions, stop seeing things this way. And I just started not paying attention to the information. You know, that's kind of what I think I did for my life, just to try to be normal, you know.
Yeah. And then take us to your NDE.
Yeah, so life of hating everybody, you know, and being, you know, really polarized, looking at life in one way only, and not even allowing myself the possibility of seeing any other way. You know, a lot of depression, a lot of anger, sadness, digestive issues were the first thing that I started dealing with in my young adulthood, and I never connected my thoughts with why I was always having digestive issues. And eventually I lost my gallbladder, hypertension, and then I had a heart attack at age 40, like 40, age 40. I turned 41 that year. But um, when I my heart ripped 7 days before the heart attack, and I was kind of just sitting with my friends, and it was a a blue, one of the super moons, a blood blue moon,
Right.
and so I felt my blood pressure was really high, and as I was talking to them, and then I felt when the valve ripped in my heart, and but the pain radiated from my left shoulder and my back. It never felt anything. I never felt anything in my chest when the valve ripped. So I never connected it. So I had back pain, played football in high school and a tiny bit in college, but I had a lot of back pain. And so I just thought it was just back and shoulder pain. So I kind of tried to integrate it that way. It hurt for a few days, and then it eased up a little bit. I think I integrated it as that's just the way my back is gonna hurt now, you know. And then the seventh day I had a heart attack, and I was just leaving work, and I was just saying goodbye to people. Offered a lady a ride because she had been sitting in a chair waiting for a ride for a while, but she, told me that the ride was near. And then there's another guy that told me, you see you tomorrow, Mr. Williamson. And I was like, I'll see you tomorrow. And then I was stepping off the curb, and I felt the sting in my heart, and immediately I could feel my heart beating differently, and I started losing my breath. I was like having to breathe. Like it was hard to. I had to breathe deeply to keep my breath. And so I got in the car, and I was like, should I call 911 now, or should I, try to make it home? I decided to go home. I called
Of
my
course,
son.
you're a guy. That would be what a guy would do, right?
Exactly. But I did call my son's mother. I called Trish, and I told her, what was happening. And so I get home. I'm still. She works from home, so she was upstairs, and I was kind of just downstairs trying to decide, is this getting better? Is it getting worse? I was like, let me eat a snack. So I ate a snack. And by the time I finished the snack, I realized that it's getting worse. It's not getting better. And I tell her that I need to go to the emergency room. And on the way, I'm just having to breathe deep, to kind of keep my breath. And I'm feeling like the little sting in my chest. It's not any extreme pain, but it's just a sting that is getting more consistent. And the breathing is the biggest thing. Like I can't keep my breath. And so by the time we get to the emergency room, I'm really breathing deeply to try to keep my breath. And the guy is asking me to sign paper, and I'm afraid that I'm dying, so I get mad at him. I cuss him out really good, and but by the time I'm finished cussing him out, the gurney is busting through the door, and I'm on it. I came back and apologized to him after they put the stents, because I had a heart attack. They just put stents in my heart. They didn't realize that my valve had ripped at that moment. But once I got on the gurney, literally like 20 seconds maybe, they pushed me for a while, and as they were turning the corner, I could see the doors that they were pushing me to where they were going to be defibrillating me. But I passed out as soon as they kind of turned the corner. I was passed out. But I mention this a lot because there are people who just say it's an hallucination, but I was already passed out before I got into the room. But when I was resuscitated, I knew where everything in the room was because I could see it when I was out of my body. And I was like, if that was, yeah, so I had never been in that room before. So I couldn't have hallucinated what was in the room and where everybody was situated in that room, while I was passed out.
You have an example of something you saw or heard someone say while you were out of your body in that room?
There was a woman in the back of the room holding her face with both of her hands. I couldn't hear if the voices from the sound from the voices was muffled,
right?
But I could hear their thoughts, and I could hear and I could feel what they were feeling. And but there was a woman holding her hands on her face, and she was really distressed that I was dying, and I could feel her compassion and love for me deeply. And so I stared at her a lot as I was floating above myself. And because I wanted to figure out how to tell her that everything that I was experiencing was beautiful and that she shouldn't feel that way. So I just stared at her a lot. And also the guy that was holding the defibrillator pads, he was really compassionate. He felt a lot for me and what was happening. And I wanted to let him know the same thing. And I could just feel it. So
I have to really say that again for the listeners. As you were dead on the table and they were trying to resuscitate you, you were above your body, wanting to comfort the people around you who were upset about what was happening to you. That is such a beautiful perspective, and it shows how free of pain we are once we leave the body, right?
Yeah, everything was perfect. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Did you feel love, the God love everyone talks about? Talk about that.
Yeah. Above my body, I felt no confusion, no pain. I was clear about everything. I knew that the body was dead, and I knew that I used to be there. And that was pretty much the way that I heard the phrase was, he's dead. You used to be there. His body is dead. His mind is dead. His ego is dead. And then I kind of asked, so what remains, And then the words that kind of flooded in were light, spirit, energy, soul, maybe a few more, spirit. But I was watching, just above watching everything, watching them defibrillate. And the next phrase that I heard was, you killed yourself with your personality, And I knew immediately what that meant, the anger, the hate, the depression, the sadness, all of it. It led to all of the illnesses that I dealt with, the hypertension, all of it, and that led to me dying. And I knew that, I was really clear about that. So I watched for a while. I still was looking at the woman that was feeling so much about me dying. I was still trying to figure out. And here's the thing, like, I really feel like I could have learned how to tell her that I was okay. Like, if I would have stayed there long enough, in my awareness, I feel like I would have figured it out, and I would have been telling her, look,
yes,
yeah, he's fine. He's on another side. He's experiencing something really beautiful. You don't have to feel this way. Like, I know that if I'd have stayed there longer, I would have figured it out. Like, I feel so certain about that because I was so intent on that, while I was watching her. But at some point, I kind of just casually took my attention up to the ceiling. I saw the ceiling for just a split second, and then I was gone. And initially, I was in a void, and I felt that love that you mentioned, and everybody else seems to mention as well. It was like a force. It was more than like an emotion. Like, love doesn't always really cut it for me. Sometimes I don't feel like it's an appropriate word. I feel like we say it so much that we don't necessarily understand what it feels like, And but it felt like something. It felt like electricity. It felt like uh, I don't know, and it felt tangible. It wasn't just a thought or, a word. It was something way more. And also, I felt like I was that same thing. And the environment that I was in felt like it was that same thing as well, So it was just, it's a multifaceted thing, But in that blackness, I just kind of was moving through it, and that blackness was so dense that it felt tangible as well, and like I was moving through it like it was velvet. It's really soft, like a really soft isn't the word. It's just like you just flow through it, and it feels almost like you're one with it as you're flowing through it, And there are things in the void that you interact with, but they don't become fully clear. It's like a face might start to form and then it'll fade away. Um, you might hear words, but none of them are really intelligible. It's just a bunch of kind of chatter. You might see other stuff, but it just kind of forms and then misty, like, kind of just fades away. But it seemed like everything was there, in the void. And when I was at some point, I could see that I was coming out of it, and I was looking down into it. And any thought that I had, before I could even complete the thought, if it was any tension or anything that I needed to clarify, I could see the void kind of move, like a twirl, a color change, nothing, no clear picture or image or anything, but like a twirl or a color change. And the clarity would be there, and it was instantaneous. Before the thought could even be fully formed, the clarity would be happening as I'm looking into the void, and that kind of happened too as I just kind of looked around in space. Things that I saw. The first big thing that I saw was a star forming region, and all of the cotton candy cloud colors, like the blue, the dark blue gradiating into the light blue into white, the dark red radiating into pink down into white, and the white clouds around, and then you see the faint stars forming in the center. Some of them are kind of together, like maybe 4 5 together, like faint. And the thought I had was, so this is what stars are born. And the way that I moved close to everything else, I never moved close to the star forming region, to the inner parts of it. I kind of stayed on the clouds, and I never moved into it. And it felt like it was a sacred space, like I wasn't supposed to go into the area where the stars were being born.
Yeah.
Everything else was just me looking around. I saw the light. The light was up and to the right, and it was very, very far away. Like, I mean, very far away, but I could still feel the pull to it. When I put my attention on it, if I didn't will myself to move anywhere, any other direction, I would just float that way. But I was looking at everything and moving all over the place. I just wanted to travel, and that's like I would look at something, and it would be like and the distance between me and that thing would disappear, and I would be like past it, and I would know what it is in all of the space that I covered. I would understand that as well. And it was like I was growing. I was attention is what I appeared to be, because I didn't really remember being a human. The only time I remembered the context of humanity was when I looked back into the emergency room, which was down and to the left. The light was up and to the right. The emergency was down and to the left, and I was looking out into space in this L, like a 90-degree angle. And I think that's important too, because I've seen these images on in Egyptian temples, these 90-degree angles, and I even after the NDE, trying to figure out what happened to me. I came across some information about how science views how the dimensions are stacked on each other, and it's like a staircase. So it's like 90-degree angles, and it's supposed to be 11 of them. And I'm sure these theories are also always being refined. So that was like a couple of years ago. I come across some information about that. But
Beautiful.
yeah. But I kept looking back into the emergency room because the woman was still there holding her face. And at some point, me staring back into the emergency room, I got resuscitated. And I remember the first thought that I had was, damn, they woke me up. But I immediately blurted out, "Are you okay?" And I was looking to the left of the corner of the room for the woman.
Oh.
There were people around me, so I don't remember if I ever saw her, and I don't even know if she was really even there. If she could have been a spirit or ancestor. It seemed almost like it was my mother's twin sister who passed a little bit later that year, but she was in bad at that time, like in a hospice environment, I think. And so I don't know if she was there, but and it was also when I laid back, and this is funny, there was a face of a white guy who looked like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. And he was just really, his eyes were really wild and wide. And he just said, really wide-eyed, "What did you see?"
Wow.
And I was, I don't know, I guess I was tired from the defibrillator. I don't know. I was out of it. But I wanted to say something to him, but I couldn't get a whole lot of words. So what I said to him was just some silly David stuff. I said, I did my eyes the same way his eyes were when he asked the question. Blackness.
That's
and then
great.
and then I just kind of passed out. I was so tired. But and from there, I didn't talk about the experience at all for probably about 3.5 years. I may have shared it with family members and stuff, just so the basics of it, that I didn't die. I was watching all of this from above, but I didn't really go into detail. But like 3.5 years later, I got on the Clubhouse app and I just started sharing it and realized that a lot of people have had NDEs. Met some people who were podcasters and on Clubhouse, and they invited me to their podcast, and it's just been kind of nonstop from there as far as the invitations to podcasts, interviews, and meeting people in this same universe that's just been opened up to me.
So David, in your NDE, you saw this other universe, right? That is so filled with a word bigger than love, and you got so many questions answered as you explored around there and you saw the beauty of it. How did that then inform your understanding when you came back about the energy you carry through life and how it affects your life?
When I came back, initially I was probably way more depressed than I was before, because I wanted to go back to where I was when I died. So it was hard for me to imagine how to reintegrate back into society when I didn't really see it as really high society. Like I didn't see it as something that I really wanted to reintegrate back into, so it was like, I don't even know how I can fake this, and so it was just really depressing. And I tried to go back to work, and I did notice that at work I performed a little bit better, because I was just kind of focused on like relearning how to be. I wasn't attached to my personality, and I started noticing that as I was interacting with other people, it was kind of like I noticed that I didn't have any response to like triggers. I didn't really have a lot of triggers. I was just kind of focused on learning what I needed to learn and performing at the job, and I was doing well. Yeah. I got a great review. They were going to hire me full time, and then they got message from corporate, which it was a Japanese company, but they got message from Japan that role they weren't going to hire external contractors for. So I didn't get the job. So I got back depressed again. I went back home, looking for work, and I was like, this world's the same. It's more disappointment. And I just deeply depressed. And but I did finally get back, working, and I started realizing, like I said, that there was an opportunity in not having an attachment to the way that I looked at things before. I started talking to people differently. I started just trying to pivot, and I started seeing hope where I never saw hope before. I did see a timeline that's kind of forward projecting that is positive, and that kind of now counters the timeline that I saw at age 6, in the future that was really negative. Yeah. And so now I even look at timelines differently now that I'm older, and I've kind of tried to understand this stuff for a long time. Just because I saw that timeline as a child doesn't mean that anyone is doomed to experience it. It was it's just information, and a lot of it is based upon how I understand the variables that I'm processing, that I'm trying to understand, that I'm that I'm so now I'm just hopeful, and I just see positive possibilities for humanity on this planet.
But David, I think you underplay the importance of this incredible experience and your role in sharing with the world now. That yes, we might all have many reasons to be in conflict with one another according to what our personalities and our human parts tell us. But as you explained, when you lifted into the divine, it's almost like your personality got cleansed away from you, and you were just your pure soul self again, right?
Yes. When I was in space, when I took my attention from looking at the light and then back into the emergency room, my attention went through me, and what I was just the orb of light, and that was it. So when I came back into this planet, and I look at another human being now, what I assume to be, whether I'm inside this body or outside this body, is that orb of light. Because when my body, mind, ego stop working, that orb of light is what left. So that's what I assume myself to be. And I don't assume myself to be vastly different than every other human being on the planet. So my assumption is everybody is that orb of light as well. So, and that orb of light isn't confused. It's not caught up in human, triviality and nonsense. It understands this thing. And so in that state, I got a glimpse, I guess, at what could be about how this fits, how this should feel, and how we should behave. And it's not as mystical a message as the experience itself is, because what it boils down to is we have to treat each other better. Period. We can't. There's no mysticism in that. We have to listen to each other. We have to allow our biases we have to be able to de-emphasize our biases and just listen to people, learn. Like even as it relates to what's going on in Israel and Gaza, without being there or without knowing people that are there, all we rely on is the news, and the news is they deal with ratings, so they have to kind of sensationalize things and present things in polarized ways, and that polarizes our opinions, because it's that's what we rely on, the internet and the news to even know that these things are happening. So if we're getting polarized information or not just bad information, and our passions are being pulled into this, then we may need to withdraw so much attention to these things until we truly understand what's happening there, and we can humanize the people, the characters that are involved, versus listening to the narratives and there's a bad guy and there's some good guys, and because this is an old fracture, and you can't look at 2023 news and say your opinion of it is fully it's fully established, it's fully relevant. No, it's not. You can't look at the news in 2023 and think that you have an understanding of a fracture that began thousands of years ago and hundreds of years ago, so
I think that's such an important message for the world, no matter what news channel anybody's watching.
Yeah,
they're really not seeing the whole story. So I want to ask you, you're such an analytical thinker and you've studied so much about religion, about God, and then you had your own experience of going into the divine realms. What would you say is your soul's purpose here? Why did you come to this body, to this personality? And why did you choose, if it's possible we choose, the lifetime that you found yourself born into? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I do. I feel like this lifetime presents me with an opportunity to share a message that I think is really pertinent to now, and that's is the pivot that comes after you see the truth, after you see clarity, see reality. Because when you have bias and you operate in this world based upon narratives and pre-programmed identities and all this prepackaged stuff, you're not living, you're not having an experience, you're just reading a script, So once you drop the script and you actually start living, that pivot is a beautiful opportunity. And that's what I had, was a pivot, the opportunity to pivot and see reality differently. There are people who are having these pivots spontaneously through NDEs, through spiritual experiences, through psychedelics, however they have them, and it's confusing. It's confusing and it's difficult sometimes to pivot.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think that I'm really, really good at is helping people understand what happened to them and start grounding the ideas that they got exposed to, or they're constantly getting exposed to, into reality and into their reality. It doesn't, because it's their the artifacts that are important to them are the language that they see this or speak about this through, is the language I have to learn to help them, ground what their experience. So for me, it's a continued. I lived 40 years of my life in my head, and this next 40 plus is going to be learning other people's perspectives, and 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 really listening to other people's perspectives so that what I've come to learn, I can just integrate what they're sharing back into it so that they could feel connected to the same story that I've come to experience as well. Because the truth of what I experience is just oneness. Love is a vehicle and it's the canvas upon which this experience is created. It's the vehicle that allows creation to occur, and it is also the canvas upon which it's occurring.
Yes.
And love may not be the appropriate word, but it's that energy.
And you saw nothing that would lead you to believe there is a hell. Is that correct?
I didn't. But what I experienced and what I've read and heard from other people is that wherever your attention is in life, you can influence the things that show up in your transition experience and as you're transitioning out of this experience. And if your attention was on hellfire and brimstone for a huge portion of your life, then it could potentially become a part of your experience. And most of the time, people who practice Christianity see Christian artifacts in their NDE. People who practice Buddhism see Buddhist artifacts. It's where your attention is in this life that kind of influences the artifacts that show up in the NDE. But the attention can be on hell and on judging yourself and on hating yourself so much to where you have to navigate that energetic residue in order to get to that space of love.
Yes. Yeah.
But I don't think that I didn't experience any long period of confusion or negative. But I've heard other people's experiences, so I don't negate that
Yeah.
there could be a moment or a period that you have to kind of get through your own human residue,
Yeah.
to
I've
get
heard that
fully out of
too,
it.
and I've read that in many different traditions. The Hindus call it the realm of the hungry ghost, as you know. I mean, it
Yeah,
seems like every religion has a name for that kind of experience. But what I love so much about you in particular is that you understood this mystical experience, which is a very indescribable experience when we're back on Earth. And you missed it or you longed for it. And so first you were depressed. And that is such an honest sharing, because so many of us who've either had a NDE or a shared death experience or an out-of-body experience, yes, we come back into our body and we kind of don't know what to do with that. And then people will say, well, why did it take you so many years to start talking about this? And the truth is, it took me that long to process it, to understand it, and to quit being sad that I wasn't in that place right now,
yeah, yeah,
And then
yeah,
how do we bring that into our everyday lives? Well, that's a whole nother challenge, like you said that the lingering message for you from that experience is kindness. And in my opinion, there's nothing more important, right? I mean,
yeah,
even if we go back and pull what I think is probably the one true statement from the Bible on the Sermon of the Mount, and Jesus says, I give you a new commandment more important than any of the others, and it is to love one another. That seems to be the truth that people come back with
yeah,
from these kinds of experiences.
yeah. And I have a friend who had an NDE as well. His name is Zach, and he and I talk a lot. I think you met him at the conference as well, but
Yeah.
we really help each other in our healing and grounding of the experience and trying to understand it deep on a deeper level. But the one thing that we talk about and that I agree with him 100% on is that you, when you come back, there's a difference. And the difference could be related to hardware because the brain was deprived of oxygen for a while, so you could have damaged something. But it's also the software that you had allowed to kind of play out so aggressively within you that led to your illness in the first place. So it's like your hardware has changed, so you can't even look at those ideas the same anymore because they don't fit in the brain in the same spaces anymore.
I love that.
So it's like I've been trying to I had to understand first what was different. And it came through trial and error, like responding in habitual ways to things, to triggers. But at the same time, realizing that I wasn't triggered. It was just a habit. I just responded that way out of habit. And then when I see that, I can say, okay, this time I'm not going to respond that way because I don't have to respond in an automatic way because I'm really not triggered. So I can kind of choose how I'm going to respond next time. And
I
when I
love
started,
that you say choice, because I just interviewed another near-death experiencer recently, and she came away from it saying that, you know, the God consciousness told her that if she went back to Earth, she had to teach about choices, that everything here is a choice. And that seems to be what you're saying is the message you got as well.
yeah, but and as me and Zach discuss this stuff more and more, it's also about, it's not just one choice, it's about the polar opposite choice as well, understanding both sides of the coin always and holding both sides in reverence, you know, so that you're not judging people who don't choose as you choose, but you're using them as a mirror to understand the virtue that may be in choosing the other way, the variables that lead up to them choosing the other way, so that you could actually have a conversation. If there needs to be compromise, I have to humanize you first, you know.
But what you said is so important. You said holding both sides to be sacred, or holding both sides in reverence, I think is what you said.
Yeah.
That is it. That seems to be really the only way forward for humanity. And it's so different from how humanity has behaved until
Yeah.
now, you know?
Yeah.
So you have
Yeah.
to write a book about this, David.
Yes. Yes. I'm wrapping my mind around it all. All of this is, you know, I started talking about it in 2021, you know, and the podcast interview started around there.
Mhm.
And it was slow initially, so it's still kind of new, you know. So I got to catch up now, you know. So it's gonna
Well,
happen. Yeah.
I'm just so happy that you're sharing this story. And, you know, I think it brings us to so many important points for modern humanity that, yes, we're in an extremely divided time right now. And, you know, and yet there are people like you having these, being pulled out into a higher plane to understand it differently, to come back in and teach that. And hopefully more and more people are opening to these kinds of ideas, because in mainstream physical life, you choose a religion and you believe what you're told to believe about that, or you choose a political stance and you believe what you're told to believe about that. And all of those things are kind of crumbling right now. And I think that's really good, because just like you said, we are being asked to hold both sides in reverence. And that is the hardest calling humanity has ever faced. And imagine if we can accomplish it, David, what a totally different world this can be.
Yes. Definitely. Yeah.
And you are one of the people here who's supposed to be doing that.
Yeah. I'm compelled. So I mean, I had a moment where I was contemplating, you know, tucking tail and running back to my cave in solitude.
Sorry, you don't get to do that.
Yeah, but now I feel I can handle it. I feel I feel good helping people. I feel good when a person says that a conversation that they had with me truly helped them see things differently. And you know, and I have them I have those conversations pretty regularly now. And people are making me see myself more clearly and in ways that I don't think I've ever seen myself. And I'm just healing, you know, from my own trauma, my own um, just identity stuff, the you know perceptual issues, just the some of the race stuff still, you know, pops up here and there. But the beautiful thing about my experience now is that I truly see, I see when it's happening, right? And I see the alternative ways of looking at the situation, so that I don't have to regress, you know, back into emotions that ultimately led to me dying. You know, I'm not gonna choose those feelings anymore. I'm just not. I know where they lead.
And I know that you have a son. How has this experience informed how you talk to your son or how you tell him about the world?
Yeah, I try not to yell at him at all anymore. I try to be flat with him when I'm speaking, when I'm disciplining him. You know, sometimes I'm not as good as I am other times, but the next goal with him is to teach him virtues, to teach him and to teach him in various contexts, whether it's religious or philosophical, and to speak about it and ask him about how he can apply it in his life, and or what virtue does it. If you eat too many chips, or, are you practicing temperance? Like, I want him to understand how to tether these philosophical ideas that people often value back to behavior, so that it's not just these ideas like rampant running ideologies, that are just creating tension. But these are ideologies rooted back into reality, so you can see the value of them as you walk your path, and I'm able to see that in every tradition now because I see one story.
Yeah.
I don't care what the specifics are. I only see one story in every story now.
I love that. Whether
Yeah.
it's Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, whatever it is truly one story. I love that so much.
It's our story.
It's our story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, David, thank you so much. So to our listeners, this is David Williamson, an NDE experiencer, near-death experiencer. And David, how do people find you or reach out to you?
I finally changed my crazy Instagram handle. It's David A. Williamson 731. That's Instagram.
Okay.
Facebook is, facebook.com/DVD 731. Email address, DVD 731 @proton.me. Okay. And website is forthcoming. Like I said, I got to catch up. So
yeah, well, I'm going to be nudging you to get that website up.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right,
yeah.
Sweetheart. Thank you so very much. And you're just a beautiful soul, and it's an honor to know you.
Thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Until we meet again, everybody, this is Sue Frederick saying thank you for this amazing mystical conversation with David Williamson. Bye-bye.